Please welcome Eliza McNitt, writer and director at Chromista.
Hello, I am Eliza McNitt, and today we are going to go on a journey through space and time. I am the writer and director of a film called Ancestra, and it is a short that is a hybrid of both live action and generative video. And it was produced by Darren Aronofsky, Chromista, and Primordial Soup in collaboration with Google Creative Lab and DeepMind using VO 2 and 3. So for those who are not familiar, VO is the AI generative video model from Google. And our challenge was to figure out how to use VO in a formal film production pipeline. So I just want to set the stage. I began this project last year before VO was released. And I walked into a room in Google and they showed me this video model. And I was so scared. And I was like, this is the end of filmmaking. I don't know what to do. And then when I got to roll up my sleeves and actually work with the tool, I discovered what an incredible and powerful tool this was for creativity and imagination driven by artists. So today I'm going to show you the film and take you inside of our process. And it was really essential to me in telling this story using AI tools that human beings were at the center of the story. So all the actors are humans, and we worked with over 200 people in the process of making this film. So first, let's watch it. The day that I was born, I nearly died. There are worlds that a camera can't reach, inner worlds, cosmic ones, and that's what led me to use generative video to tell this story. So this is the story of my mom and the day that she brought me into the universe.
We're in the 50s.
We need to go.
Is your husband here?
This was supposed to be a checkup.
Crash C-section!
I am not giving birth in a leotard.
You need help here?
I've done everything right. I haven't even had sugar for the past 9 months.
Severe bradycardia.
She needs to come out now.
Is my baby gonna be okay?
We're gonna do everything we can.
Am I gonna be okay?
Baby's in distress.
What do you mean baby's in distress? What is wrong with my baby? What's wrong? Please be okay. Please. What's wrong with your heart? Listen. Listen. Your grandma's heart was the first sound I ever knew. Just like hers before that. And hers before that. A rhythm passed down from every mother who tore herself open just to let life through. cell that split. Even before life, it beat. Not in flesh, but in fire. Through every dying star. Back to the very first pulse of the universe.
We're getting close. Baby's out.
Cleanse the cord. Time of delivery, 10:33.
No movement.
There's no heartbeat.
Move, come on, come on.
Maintain position. Still no heart rate. Check for rhythm. Zero pulse.
More tone.
There's no heartbeat. We're losing her. Come on.
There's no rhythm on the
There's a
muscle.
heart defect. I think there's a hole in her heart.
Here we go. Here we go. Here. Not long.
A hole in your heart. A void. A silence. A rhythm passed down. Let it move through you. Let it show you how to heal. Come back to me. It does not end with me.
Regular.
Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna stop it there, but there's nothing like a little horse placenta before lunch. So the poetry of the prompt is the process of creating a new language with a generative model to achieve the story that you want to tell. So it's not about describing what we want to see, but instead capturing a feeling and letting that sculpt the image. And because Ancestor itself was this very deeply poetic and personal film, we realized that we had to approach the process with that same kind of sensibility. And so instead of instructing AI on exactly what to show, we crafted prompts using mood, imagery, video reference, and even scientific experimentation. So today I'm going to take you inside some of these techniques and how we did it. So here's how this all began. I had this very unique opportunity to tell a really personal story about my origins in the universe. It really was a dream project where I got to just experiment with these tools and tell a story that was about my beginnings and about my mom. And so it was really important to me that this wasn't an AI film. and that this was the story that I wanted to tell. It's literally about my heart. So leveraging AI was simply an opportunity to make it real within the 10 weeks that we had to make it. So I'm going to say that again. We had 10 weeks from me writing the script to our premiere at Tribeca. So we started with color, and as my script really took shape, our conversations began around the story using color as emotion. And it gave us a framework for the visual worlds and the prompts that this world would inhabit. And so ultimately, it's the story that drove those visuals, whether or not they were technically possible with AI. And so that meant we had to get extremely creative, bending the tool toward my vision and not letting its limitations dictate what was possible. And I wanted the film to really transport you from the microscopic to the cosmic, from a hole in my heart to the Big Bang. And at its center is a force that binds those scales together, which is the cosmic power of a mother's love. So we had these 4 primary visual challenges that we set out to create, each one requiring its own language, technical approach, and emotional logic. And so we started where anyone does when you sit down at a computer and you start prompting. The things that we knew we wanted to capture were the Big Bang, baby in the womb, traveling through the bloodstream, and flying through the cosmos. So we put that in, and here's what we got. And so we realized really quickly that this film was not going to be created in VO with a few simple keywords. In fact, using those keywords like Big Bang, blood cells, cosmos, were much more likely to trigger these wildly generic visual tropes. And so this led to our first insight as a team: AI has no taste. It has no idea what you want. And these models can really flood us with generations, but only we, the artists, can decide what resonates and carries truth. And so that act of discernment, choosing, shaping, and giving meaning is the essence of our creativity. AI can create, as we all know, but as of now, only we can reflect. And so we had to think very differently in our approach. So how are people doing this before CG? We drew a lot of references from practical filmmaking, like from visionaries such as the great and late Doug Trumbull and Peter Parks, and their work on films that I love, like Tree of Life, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and The Fountain, where they used microphotography to capture hidden organic worlds. And so we wanted our process with AI to echo that spirit, to embrace the unpredictability and flaws and the poetic accidents that make an image feel both human but also cosmic. And both of them showed us that when the tool does not exist, you have to invent it. So with Ancestra, we carried that spirit forward into our own process in writing prompts, but with the same principle, that invent a language to bend the tool toward our vision. So when we use Gemini, which is Google's large language model, to learn how to communicate with VO and to really understand how it sees the world. And so what we did, I thought, was really fascinating. We essentially used one language model to communicate with another in its own words. And it was a very meta process. And so we began this massive exploration in building practical effects with Gemini. And we discovered something kind of fascinating, that in the physical world, our creativity is always limited by, for me, my own knowledge of science, my access to tools or chemicals, and ultimately by the laws of physics. But in this new space where I could create, these constraints really opened up. I wasn't bound by a lab, by the cost of materials, or by the impossibility of simulating reactions that don't exist on Earth. With Gemini, I could really create reactions outside the reach of chemistry or nature, which I found extremely inspiring. The prompt became our version of Trumbull's slit scan camera or Park's microscopes. It was this handcrafted instrument. And so instead of asking the model plainly what to show, we wrote in a way that sculpted how it should feel. And so, I also wanted those interior shots to feel like cosmic nebulas within the body. And I don't know if anyone else has really experienced this, but I found as I was going through this process and seeing images like this that our brains haven't seen before, I started having these entirely different, like an entirely different visual language to my dreams. So this all led to my first ask for my team, which was a continuous one-shot fly-through inside the mother's body, into the womb, leading to a birth through C-section. Totally easy. So how do you translate the interior world of blood, breath, and heartbeat into imagery that feels really alive and not clinical? So leveraging the knowledge that we gained from making practical effects, we started exploring what we could do inside the body. And, we were getting better. This, not quite, but this was what I like to call endoscopy vision. But we realized we couldn't control the camera. And VO only wanted to make these straight fly-throughs, and each generation, as we know, could only be a maximum of 8 seconds. So a single shot with the realism and intensity we were after was basically impossible. But this breakthrough came when one of our engineers began testing Google's video-to-video model, which allows you to pass both a text prompt and video to VO. And so this is his office chair. And he built this setup with a pile of blankets and wires to very loosely approximate what the inside of the body looks like. And he filmed this on his phone. So on the far left, you see his original video. And on the right, you can see 2 different outputs with different prompts and intensity values applied. And so what was wires in one shot on his phone is now becoming these really interesting threads inside of the body. And it was beginning to resemble the interior structures of a human body. So this is when we knew we were onto something, being very creative. But we couldn't just generate single clips. They had to follow the movement from live action, sustain the consistency for almost a whole minute. So we mapped out the entire sequence onto a diagram of the human body. And so I got to, as a director, I got to block this scene just like I would block a oneer on set. So you can see our terrifying model here and all the concerned looks of our artists. And this is our animator, this amazing artist, Martin Neblong, who is at Google, and he's actually sculpting and building these wild sequences in the PS4 game Dreams with his Move controllers. And so this combination of 3D modeling and video-to-video prompting was starting to capture this feeling that we were after. And so it began to unveil this visual world that felt organic, intense, and otherworldly. And so we carried forward those learnings from our practical texturing studies into the way that we approached prompting. And we really wanted to find that right balance of softness and being immersed in the body without it feeling too gruesome or visceral, and wanting it to feel cosmic and expansive. So Martin would animate a video like this, as you can see here, as we're going down in this VR world he created. And we would feed that video and the prompt to VO and produce a final output that looks like this. And so here, I'll just show you a breakdown of this. So here's the full sequence from the 3D model to previs. And then it moves to our final VO output and color grade. So just to give you a sense of what we went through to get to just that single shot. And so now with this modeling and prompting method that we discovered, we were able to bring this emotion and continuity to the rest of the scene inside of the body. And I also wanted a cosmic and ethereal C-section that was told from the POV of the unborn child, the way that I remembered it. And undeterred, you can see Martin here in a meeting performing a C-section. And by just taking this very primitive model of a baby that was captured at the right angle with the right amount of light and give this to VO, so it starts to really understand our vision, it can turn it into something with really deep complexity and nuance that captures the imperfections of what it could feel like to be inside of the womb in a way that would have been nearly impossible with traditional CG. This is one of my favorite shots of the movie. So next up were the healing voids, and this is that moment of rupture of the holes that had to be visualized. The challenge was, how do we unearth all of the potential within the models to discover things aesthetically arresting that don't necessarily feel like AI. So we went back to Gemini to help uncover what we didn't know and what different cameras can be found inside of the model that reveal a completely different way of seeing the world. Or, for example, different kinds of scientific imaging techniques. And what was so amazing and what I loved about this is that you could even begin merging them together to invent completely new imaging techniques that don't actually exist. It became so surreal to the point where Gemini was inventing its own perceptions of the world. So here, for example, we have the mycelium network perception, seeing as fungus does, not as light, but as electrical signal. And so we suddenly could build these worlds from perception itself, rather than from the visible world alone. We could merge these different concepts like fractal growth and blood flow with plant life and regeneration. Or, this was one of my favorites, take the birth of the universe from the Big Bang and visualize it through the lens of an ultrasound. Or represent collapsing stars with poetics. So what we discovered was that beauty really lies in those in-between places where fragments of data are twisted and bent into these images that we have never seen before. And this is where the creativity emerges, not simply recreating a concept that's stored in the model's training data, but blending ideas to produce something that's totally new. And so as we uncovered more conceptual themes and visuals that resonated with the emotion of the film, we'd feed those prompts back into Gemini as a set of system instructions, basically teaching it how to think, how to write, and over time, we built a shared conceptual sandbox of what really felt true to the film. And from this came this explosion of ideas. And for every generation that you see that made it into the film, there were literally thousands that did not. And what we love so much about working with these models is when you find this perfect collection of language, every rerun you do creates something totally different. And so you can, instead be inspired by its potential. And because inside of this one singular prompt lives this infinity of worlds that you can explore. But as a director, you want some control over that. And so we also, for example, we loved this red fractaling growth pattern and the energy and motion. But with just a few words, you can reimagine that same environment as ice branching across a surface, or something organic like coral. And so we discovered working, I think everyone thinks that it's a slot machine, but it's really not. It's more like a hunt for gold, where when you finally strike a pocket, it opens up a whole vein, and everything is very extraordinary, as if you've unlocked a hidden world of abundance. But of course, within that, we had to tell a story, and so the images had to be directed to those tiny moments of imperfection that fit our story and made the whole feel as if it was struggling to close, to feel as if it was truly the baby's heart. And what I love about VO is how real it looks, but the realism is also quite limiting. And especially when you're chasing a specific motion, we were after something much slower, more poetic. And so we took the motion from some of our favorite generative clips, like the one that you see on the left, ran it back through the same video-to-video process, using it almost like choreography and shaping the ultimate output, which is what you see on the right. And we could take things like the effortless motion of a jellyfish and then map that onto a void of ice. And so we really pushed to make this scene feel as realistic as possible, because the moment the hole in the heart closes is really the emotional core of the film. I think this is the most I've ever said the word hole in front of an audience. Next was this one shot reversing in time from the birth in the hospital through the creation leading into the Big Bang. So this question was, how do you create prompts that carry the rhythm of history collapsing in reverse? So it was, really esoteric. And we leaned into what mattered most in the story, which was this connection between mother and child. And also what VO does best, short, cinematic, beautiful clips. And really to capture the connection between mother and child in all forms. And amplifying the intensity of this moment even when you're moving to the earliest stages of our universe forming. And so a lot of these scenes, they weren't actually solely prompted VO outputs. Our VFX artists layered and composited multiple generations to form visuals that could really carry the story. And this is the Big Bang sequence. This was a blending of about 20 different generations, each time remapped and combined to build something that reached the quality and standard that we were after. So, through this, it became really clear you are essential to the process. AI did not replace anyone's jobs. It augmented the process and gave us new tools, from the storyboard artists we worked with to our incredible VFX supervisor, Aaron Raff. AI was never a substitute for creativity. It was an amplifier. And, the act of shaping feeling into form will always belong to artists. So our last challenge was we needed a baby. And I felt filming with children was unethical. They don't consent. I wanted to come up with a solution for being on set, filming without an actual baby. So we filmed our actress, the incredible Audrey Corsa, several ways with a doll and just holding air like this. And we began devising compositing strategies of how to put a generated baby into these scenes. But the techniques weren't really giving us the realism we needed. And so about 2 weeks before picture lock, a team of researchers released an insert model where you give it an input image, and then you draw a box on top of it, use text prompts for what will happen inside of that window, and that's when we got something like this. And we thought, you know what? I think this is going to work. So you can see in the final film the original live action footage, the inserted VO generation, and the final composite and color grade from our VFX team. I also wanted the baby in the film to actually be me as a newborn, modeled on photos that my late father took of me the moment I was born. And so these are the images of me that he took. And through conversations with Gemini and how it sees the world, we were able to slowly sculpt together in language this image of me as a newborn. I do think the camera adds a few pounds to me as a baby. But the beauty of prompting is that the same landscape and language carries through. So, we can create this amazing visual continuity between baby Eliza in the hospital and baby Eliza in the womb. And because this was such a personal story to me, it really made this technical feat actually matter. As an artist and a director, I've always been really fascinated by the vastness of space, its mystery, and the way that it mirrors the questions of our origins. And for years, I hungered to weave that cosmic wonder into something personal, but I never had the tools to bridge the infinite with the intimate. So now, with these new creative technologies, I felt like I could finally tackle the story of the hole in my heart and the universe, mapping my own origin to the stars and discovering how the pulse of the cosmos really resonates within my bones. So, in a world where you can make anything, make something that matters to you, make something personal, make something human, make something with humans that you couldn't otherwise create without these tools. And, ultimately, I discovered that prompting, it's not a formula, it's a fusion of art direction, language, and experimentation. It's about composing with words, the way that a director composes with light or motion, guiding the model through tone, texture, and emotion, until the image begins to really speak back to you, until you start to feel something from the image. And at its core, it's not about controlling AI, but guiding it, really bending this strange new instrument towards a vision that only us, the humans, can hold. And that vision does come from us, the storytellers who give these words their weight. And in the end, I felt it wasn't about machines at all. It's about the human imagination that is powerful enough to shape them. And we discovered that if the tool doesn't exist, you invent one. And so with generative models, that tool is language. And the poetry is really in how we choose to shape it. And it felt like we weren't just prompting, We were inventing new ways of speaking to a machine so it can begin to carry our vision. And most importantly, I think without your voice, the machine is just noise. And that act of creating language where none existed before, that is the poetry of the prompt. Thank you.